Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show for today. I hope everybody's safe and well and above the floodwaters for those of you who are north of us, or even a few of those who are south of us. So I hope everybody's safe and well. But anyway, we'll get on with the show today. We're going to got a few things to do today. We're concentrating again on the door of our little cabinet. The cabinet, as you can see, is the framework's all done. It's pretty much up and set. What we need to do now is add all the other bits and pieces. We're going to eventually add a top and a bottom, put the door on, and we'll build a drawer for it as well. So we're going to do those sorts of things as we go along. They're taking a little bit of time. As you can imagine, an hour doesn't give you very much time to get much done, but we are getting things done slowly. So we'll concentrate on more of the door today. Hopefully we'll get the door frame fitted together, but we'll see how we go. Now, just a warning, we have a thunderstorm around us at the moment, and if everything goes black, it's because we've been shut down by thunder and lightning. So hopefully we'll get through the day. So just a little word of warning, if it goes out, it's because our thunderstorm has stopped us. Okay, so now I have in front of me all the door frame bits that we put together last week. So this is what we have. I just put all these bits together. That's the top piece. And as you can see, we cut all the butterflies last week, or the butterflies. What we need to do today is cut the keys. Now I'm going to cut the keys from these pieces of material here that I've already dressed up. The important thing to remember with the keys is to make sure that, just come in here, the piece of material is exactly the same width as your butterfly. So cut it to that width there. Now, as you can see, it fits quite snugly into the piece, just like that. The other thing to remember is that the thickness of the piece of timber has to be the thickness of our key. Now, when you look at the router bit that I used to cut the butterfly, you'll see it's our dovetail bit from the A10 cutter. Now, the distance across from here to here is 10 millimeters. So we need to make sure that that is exactly 10 millimeters thick, and that way it will fit into there. Okay, so I've got those prepared. Before we go and do that, what I want to do is I want to run a bead around the edge of the door. Now I have a demo door that we're going to be using. I'll just get that for you and I'll show you. We'll be using this door for things while we've got things gluing, and as you can imagine, gluing time is important. If you look here, you can see I've got a bead that runs around the front edge of each of the parts. You can also see that I've cut butterflies, cut the keys. On this one I've put it all together, and I'm going to show you how to dress them up in the when I've got this together and we're gluing it up. So that's what's going to happen. Now I've got to cut that bead. Now the router bit that I'm going to cut the bead with is this one here. Now that bead is called a 2-flute drawline bit. Okay, so what it does, it cuts a little bead around there, draws a nice line around the edge and cuts a nice little bead. Now, what we're going to do is use that to run around the edge. It's a Carbitool router bit, and I'll just show you some specs on it before we actually start to use it. So I'm going to go to my top camera, and if you have a pencil available, it might be an idea to write down some of these details. The router bit is called, just get it out from under there. The router bit is called a 2-flute draw lining bit from Carby Tool. The code for it, TDL3B1/2, that's this size here that I have here. Now it will give you a 5.5mm bead, and so on. If you go down through the things, you've got 4, 6, you get a 10mm bead, 7mm bead, depending on the size of the draw or the bead that you want. Now I've drawn a little drawing here. I hope you can get that. So that's what that looks like, and the bead is this little section in here. Okay, you can see where I've marked it there. So write out the details if you're intent on doing these things. You can get them from Carby Tool. Can't tell you the price because I don't know it. It's been a long time since I bought this one, but anyhow, that is. If you've got all that detail, I'm going to flick off it. If you haven't written that down and you didn't have time to, then of course you can email me and I'll give you the details of it via email. So pretty easy way to do it. So now what I want to do is I want to mark where I'm going to put my bead. And the beauty of this little router bit is that I can put the bead on the top, and I can also put it on there so I get a complete bead right around the corner. Now I'm not going to do that with this one. I'm just going to do a top edge because I want room down the middle to cut a rebate for the Perspex panel that's going to go in the door. So I need to cut a bead here, here, there, and there. Okay, so keep that in thing. Now before I do cut this bit, I'm going to do a little test first. So you need a piece of material that you can test on, and I'll show you how it works. It's quite a neat little feature that you can add on to some of your work. Okay, so lock that in nice and tight, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set the height to the bottom edge of the bead. Okay, so the bottom edge of the bead is there. So I'm going to just set my height so that that is just on my table. Okay, so that's given me, that's right on the bottom corner of the bead, is flush with the top of my table. That's the way to do it. Now, fence, we need a fence. I'll try something new today. I'm going to shift the table around. That's the beauty of our table. If you have a look at my fence, you can see that the fence, even though it's a little bit battered, it's already shaped to a similar sort of shape that I have here. Now remember, I'm going to do a test of this first, so I want to make sure that it's right. Now I don't need to use the fence, basically because I've got a bearing on there. But I'm going to use the fence anyway. It's just, to me, it seems to be a safer option. I'll just run this. Just going to run this over to here. Okay, so now I'm flush with the top of the bearing. You may hear the router bit actually chew into the fence a little bit. That's not such a problem. And I'm going to shift my table so that Pam can get the camera around. So just shifting the table around there, you can actually see what's happening here on this side of the fence. And I'm just going to run myself through the fence. Now, I have a piece of material here. If you imagine that this was the top edge that I want to put the bead on, so if I want to put the bead along here, okay, I would hold that up like so. So I'll do that and I'll run that through there. So ears on everybody, I'm just going to run this through now. Test. Now, as you can see, that's given me quite a nice little bead, and it's gone all the way over. You can see when you look at the end of it, you can see I've got a nice little bead over the end of my piece of timber. All right, so that's a complete circle. Now, if I wanted to make that bead go all the way around, all I need to do is turn my piece of timber over on the flat. And you can see the result that I have there now is I have a bead that goes all the way over. So it's a handy little router bit that you can use for getting those lovely little beads, and then we can dress the piece up to whatever we want. Now, I don't want the rebate in the bottom of there because I've got to put a trench in there, and I've taken away a fair bit of the material so that it's a little bit harder to actually get a trench that will fit in there quite neatly, particularly when the material that I'm using is only 14 millimeters thick, right? So that's really nice, and that bead actually looks good on the leg of a table, okay, or a cabinet. So outside edge corner, you get this lovely bead on it. So little something to have a little play with in the future. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run all my pieces through. And last week, I was asked the question, should you cut your rebates before you actually cut the butterflies? This is one reason that you should you know, sort of work out the best technique or the best direction to follow when you're doing each of your pieces. Because if I tried to cut my rebate and then I tried to cut this, I would have very minimal support for the material when we're doing these tasks. So it's always a good idea to sort of think about how you're going to go about it. So I've cut my butterflies while I've got lots of support, and now it's just a matter of running this through here. Now, of course, that's relatively close with my fingers, so I'm going to use my push block. So a push stick on there, and I'm just going to hold that through there. So that will give me a nice bead around my piece. Okay, ears on everybody. So, I've just made an error. I've cut the bead on the wrong side. I need the bead on the top side, not on the bottom side, which is what we should do. So I think what I might do with that, it's not irredeemable. I think what I might do with that is I might cut that on there and did it on all of them, and then I will cut my rebate at the bottom edge of the bead, which will work quite fine, I suppose. Well, I could do and have that on the inside. Flip that over and do the inside. There is a point to that. I've still got to cut a bead in there. So. Oh,
I see what you're saying.
Yep.
It should be on. It should be there.
Yeah.
Not there. Yep.
Okay, so more thinking. I was just saying to everybody, think about it first before you actually cut it. And guess what? Didn't think about it. So I'm going to cut it anyway. I can still redeem it. Okay, so
Never mind.
time to rearrange my thoughts. You can see, I'll just shift this fence out of the way. All is not lost. I will get there somehow. So we will end up with a reasonable result. Just let me get rid of this out of here because we've got to change to the route a bit. After going through all of that, saying I didn't want the bead on the inside of the board, I now have it on the inside of the board, but it doesn't look too bad. If we put it like so.
This is called troubleshooting.
Yes, a little bit of troubleshooting here. Okay, so Pammy comes in close there. You can see that I've got a bead on there. It doesn't look too bad. It's not irredeemable, or you know, like we're going to. It still fits in quite nicely with everything. So all I need to do now is cut a bead or cut a rebate for my piece of Perspex. Okay. So now I have to get that sorted. Now, the Perspex that I'm using is this. It's 3mm, and it's a piece I've cut off another off a bigger sheet. Now, the thing about Perspex is somebody said to me, why Perspex and not glass? Perspex, it's not going to break like a piece of glass. If you bump it with a tool while you're getting it in and out of the cupboard, you're likely to break a very thin piece of glass like this. The other beauty of this stuff is that you can work it with woodwork tools. Okay, so you don't need special tools or anything like that to cut it. But if you're using glass, you can always, you'll need to get a whole new system for cutting the glass to the right size. And if you make an error, actually your piece of glass is all over. You know, you've got to start again and get another piece of glass. Whereas with a piece of Perspex, you're going to get the same result as glass. You're going to have a nice cover over all the tools in the cabinet, and you're also going to have clear view, so all the way through, without the dangers of it breaking and so forth. So that's one of the advantages of using a piece of clear Perspex. If you like different coloured Perspex, well then of course you can use different colours. So what I need to do, I know that's 3mm, I've done a little test, and the reason I know that it works is because I've made a test door. Okay, so this is my test door. You'll see that I've got the covering still on the plastic. The idea of that is to stop scratching it or anything like that while you're working with the tools. You don't want any scratches or anything like that on it, so leave the coverings on it when you've got it. Sometimes it's paper, sometimes it's plastic like this, but yeah, so leave it on there and then we'll go from there. Okay, let's cut ourselves a bead. Now, the router bit that I'm using for this one is this little router bit here. Now, I said to you last week, we've got a number of different ones that I use. This one's a 3.2, which comes in our kit. If you're buying our Ultimate Cutter kit, that one comes in the kit. This is an extra you can buy. It's a 4mm one, so it's a little bit thicker. And then there's another one that we use for 6mm. And this is the one that I used to put the beading around the outside of here. So it's a 6mm trench that it cuts. And this one here is a little bit smaller if you want to go smaller. And this one here is actually the one we're going to use to cut the bead for the Perspex. So let's get that done. So again, just a little bit of nutrition there. Trevor you are absolutely right in as much as saying that it's only a mistake if you can't fix it. Well, we can fix it. It's fix our little bead problem. So let's see what we can do here. Now, what we have to do is make sure that we are we cut our bead in here. So the bead has to go into there like that. So we'll cut this little piece here. We'll set the height of the router bit to sit in that trench there. Okay, so that's what's going to happen, and then the bead will actually sit over the edge of the Perspex. If we come in 10 millimeters, okay, that will give us plenty of meat for actually to support the bead and the piece of Perspex. So we'll set that to height. It's looking pretty good there. Come down a tiny bit more. So that's my height. Lock everything in. Now I need a fence for that as well. So this is my slot cutting fence. The depth of cut is going to be 10 millimeters. That's all we need, just 10 millimeters. We don't need much more. And we'll have to go 10 millimeters to rectify that, what we might call a bit of an error. Well, it's
slight digression from the plan.
Yeah. So I'm going to come out 10 mil. That's there. Lock this in. And then it's just a matter of running along my fence this way. Okay. So, ears on everybody. And you know what I'm going to do before I start? No, I can't do it with this one because it's too thick. I was going to do a little test, but I don't need to. So ears on, push block. Move over that way a bit. I think we've saved the day. There's a little bit of furry bit there. Just take that off. A bit of sandpaper. Okay, so that just needs a little bit of a tidy up, and we've actually got a really good result. Okay, so we've come out of it smelling a little bit like roses. Well, that's what they say anyway. I'm just going to run over it again just to make sure that I've got it right. So ears on everybody. Perfect. I think we saved the day, folks. We've got the, you can see that it's given us a very nice little edge, nice little bead. Just a matter of giving it a little bit of tidy up. I think my router bit's actually losing its edge. I'll have to deal with that one. And there we have it. Okay, so that came up very, very nice. I'm quite pleased with the way that's come up, considering I didn't want to do that. And as you can see, when we put the piece of Perspex in there, we get that lovely bead just sitting a little bit proud of the Perspex, so it's not actually sitting on it. You can see it's sitting in there quite nicely. So that'll look quite nice when we've got the door on there. Okay, so now I need to cut my piece of Perspex to size. A little bit of a drink first. As you can see, make an error, just change your plan. Redesign. Thanks, John. I'm glad it looks good to you. It actually looks good to me too. Whew. That was a hard bit of work there, I suppose. Anyway, we've got that done. So that's our door frame. All I have to do now is cut the butterflies, and if I can get through that without making a blunder, there's no way back from making an error with the butterflies, apart from starting all over again, and I don't want to do that. So it's a matter of getting it cut nice. So what I want to do now is I want to cut the piece of Perspex to size so that I've got it ready to fit in once I get the door frame assembled. And so it doesn't look too bad actually. It's going to look right nice. Okay, I need a ruler. Now, when we measure up here, just got to measure to work out how far or how wide to cut our piece of material. So my measurement to the outside edge of the bead is 10 millimeters. So that'll be 10 on here. So I got 290 millimeters. I want to leave a little bit of room. Now, people say plastic won't shift and change and move around according to the weather, but the timber does, and so if you have things that fit perfectly, you'll find that as it expands, your piece of Perspex will squash up and bend. So my piece of Perspex is actually the right length, so I'm pretty much the right length there. What I need to do is cut this at 2 bring that to 9 mil. Okay, so we want about 289 millimeters. Okay, so over to the bandsaw. So now, as I said to you before, the bandsaw, you can use a bandsaw. You can scribe it off with a scribing knife if you like. So there's lots of different ways you actually can cut this, but I'm going to use the bandsaw. Might give a bit of a rough edge, but then we can file it up with a normal wood file. So we'll give that a shot. Okay. Now I'm using my bandsaw, which is set to cut along the grain. It's a ripping blade on there. I'll advise you, if you are going to do a lot of this, is to put on a crosscut blade on your bandsaw with fine teeth on it, not large teeth. This is expediency here, so we'll go from there. Okay, so I just need to adjust. I'm pretty much right where I am. I might take it a little bit more. Yep. And I'm just going to go very slowly and just trim this piece off. So what we ended up with is a fairly rough cut along the top edge, and if I go to the vise, I'll just show you how to dress that up so that it looks a little bit nicer than what it is. I'll just come around that side. Oh, something happening with that bandsaw that I need to fix. So I could put it in like so, and no support. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and this is the beauty of the HNT vise, where's my, I can actually rotate that up so I've got a little bit more support for my piece of Perspex. I can drop that down, as you can see, a little bit more support by having the vise up that way. And the beauty about these vices is that it's a pattern maker's vise, fit onto most benches. You can see it's fitted on this small bench. So what I want to do now, I've got a couple of files set here. Now my files, when I start filing, I'll generally cross file with my file and just tidy up any of the cuts, any of the cut marks from the bandsaw, and just take the edges off them very carefully. Now this is a number one cut, okay, so it's a coarse file. I think they call it a bastard file. It's very coarse, and you can see it's just taking that edge off. Now it doesn't matter if you've got a few marks on there, because we don't want to take too much off. Just keep working along it. And then the technique we use from that, after that, is what we call draw filing. Now when I draw file, I change my file down to a very fine file, number 3, this one is. And draw filing is holding it between your fingers like so, and just working. If it was a piece of timber, you would call it along the grain, but we haven't got, we've just got a piece of plastic. And then I'll just take the edge off. And I just want to take all the sharp bits off, basically, so that I've got a relatively smooth surface. It's going to be inside the timber, so it doesn't really need to be perfect. If you were going to make it perfect, what you can do is file it and then polish it with Brasso. So we can do that. So back to the desk. Now we'll see if it fits. I need to peel back a bit of the... So if we just peel off, all I'm doing here is just peeling off this is the protective plastic. Just want to peel that off, peel it back. I want to keep it on there for as long as possible. I could put tape on it. There's lots of different ways. I think you're right with tree cycle. I think you're correct in your assumption that plastic does expand in the heat. The misconception is, as I said to you earlier, the misconception is that it doesn't. But you still should allow a little bit of room. So I'm only taking out just enough to cover it. I probably should have done this earlier, but it's a task that needs to be done. I don't want to cut it off with a pair of scissors or anything like that, or a Stanley knife, because that's just going to mark the Perspex. I don't know that I would use a flame on it, Michael, because it'll just sometimes it discolours the plastic. I think giving it a file and filing it and polishing it with Brasso is probably the best, simplest and easiest answer. Look at that. There we go. I'm going to stand this up so that Pam can show you what it looks like. And there we have it. Okay, so there's our piece of Perspex. What I need to do now is cut my butterfly keys, and then we can assemble the door. Okay, I might need to do a little bit of sanding on the inside edges there where it got a bit furry during that cutting of the rebate. But yep, this is our lovely door. So it's getting there. And I do like that design feature with the bead all the way over. Okay, so it just adds another feature to the door. Okay, so let's put that aside. Actually, I'll keep a couple of those because I need to test my butterfly keys. Okay, butterfly keys. Let's get this sorted. Like I said to you earlier, they're the pieces of material that I was going to cut, and I always cut two. The reason being, at my first one, if I don't get it perfect first go, and then I got a second one to fix up my error. So, oh, actually, it's not an error, is it? So, keys are going to be done with my A10. Now, with the A10, same thing as I say when we're cutting our dovetails. Do your maintenance. Scrub it with the toothbrush, nice and clean, and add a little oil. It is a critical part in the first function in using these router bits. That little bit of maintenance only takes a few seconds, but it does save you dollars because a set of these is over $100 now. So, good idea. Need a spanner, not a ruler. Now the height. Now, if you remember rightly, what we did here is we made sure that our piece of material was the same width as our joint. Okay, so that, as you can see, fits in there quite snugly, and that's what we wanted to do. So we've got half a butterfly on this side and half a butterfly on that side, or half a key this side and half a key that side. What we need to do is we need to make sure that the point of our router bit is cutting down the centre of this piece of material. So we need to mark the centre. Now, you can measure it if you like, but I find if you use your finger gauge, you can find your centre just by guessing it. And the more you do this, the better at it you get. Turn your piece of timber around and put another mark on it. You can see I've got it right in the middle, first go. Okay, so my mark is exactly where I want my height to be for the router bit. So we sit the router bit like this. Too low. Right on our line there. So that's my height. That's all set. Now I need another fence. Get some of this out of the way. Now this time I'm going to use a large fence, and you can see that in the middle of the router bit, in the middle of the fence, I have the same cut as my router bit. I've also got centre marks and edge marks. I just need to go over those a little bit darker so that I can see them. So I have my edge marks like so. And my centre mark, that's the centre of my router bit. I've also got the marks on the top edge. Okay, so do that to your router, to your fence, if you're using this style of fence, because they come in handy, those markings, when you're setting up for, or when you're stopping and starting, and instead of having to mark things on your piece of timber, you can actually do them, use these as your visual. So what I want to do here, make sure, I need a pointing object. So if you're pointing here, you can see there's the point of my router bit. Here's the other point over here. So my perfect line is through there, because that's the longest distance between the two edges, is from there to there. Now the angle that we have down here, what we need to do is we need to make sure, because this is the same thickness as that, what we need to do is we need to make sure that this edge here, the lower section, is actually touching this edge here on our piece of timber. So when we line it up, we line up on the bottom here against that bottom there, and then that will cut a little V in here. So you'll have that little shape appearing. Okay, so you can see that I've drawn that on. It's not very good, but you get the picture. And so that's my butterfly key, and then I just dock it off to the right size. Now, here's the go. If I set that up, I'll get that over to here. Okay, so there's a problem straight away. My router bit is touching the top edge of my rebate in the fence, so I just have to cut that little bit before I start. So ears on, I'll just turn that on for a sec. Okay, so that's giving me the right depth. Still sideways a little bit. Now, what we need to do, now the reason I pointed out that the longest distance through the router bit was from point to point, you need to make sure your points are actually in line with that. And you have to do that by basically feel. You know that your router bit is sitting at 90 degrees to your fence, so therefore this should be sticking out the right side. So I'm just lining that up so that it's just touching the edge there. You can't see what I'm doing from that side. Got an edge off that piece of timber there that's not going to work for me. Okay, so there's my fence set. Lock that in place. I had a clamp here somewhere. Okay, now as I said before, the beauty of this table is we can move the table around. So I'll just shift the table a little bit so Pammy can get the camera on it, like so. Now what I have here is my push block. Now we make these push blocks. It's part of the butterfly accessory kit. And you can see I have a rebate cut out of the side of it. Did quite a nice little thing. The handle's nicely done, and my piece of timber basically fits on there. Now what I want to do is I'm going to push that up against there, and then I'm just going to feed that along using the push block. Now it jumps and carries on there because it's catching on the router bit, but normally that would just feed straight along like so. One of the problems he has is as soon as you put that into there, it's going to push it backwards, and we don't want that to happen. So the very important thing to do here is to set up where you're going to start your cut. Now I'm starting a little bit in from the edge. Reason being is because if we have a flat spot on this end and a flat spot on that side, when we turn our piece of timber over, it's supported both ends. If you don't do that, you're going to find that you're going to end up with the piece of material being cut too deep on one side. So what we need is a stop. So a piece of material there like that, and we could have another cramp. Okay, so now I have a stop and I have something to rest against, and then push, and then away we go. All right, ears on everybody, and I'll cut these. Somebody said to me once, why have you got such a short piece of timber? Well, I only need 4 of them. I've got 4 corners, so I only need 4 pieces. And you make sure that that length there is enough to get 4 out of. So now I need to dock the end off it, because how can I test it? So I've got docked the end off. And that is probably the thing that, that's the reason that I've got 2 pieces, because I'm going to dock this off. If it doesn't fit, well, then I've got to do it again. But that's the beauty of it. So to the saw. It's just a matter of docking off the end. And if you look at that, you can actually see the shape that we're trying to achieve is sitting there. And I've got a very funny feeling that I've taken too much material off. Turn it over the right way. So, oh no, it's perfect. Look at that. I love it. So that's going to be beautiful. So nice, neat, and I just need now to dock them all up. So that came out really nice. I'm really pleased with that. So all I have to do now is cut them all to length, and then we'll fit the door together. Okay, so we'll go back over to the saw. Now when you cut these, this is the thickness we need, with plus a little bit more. Okay, so if I just mark, so that's my size. And what I'll do is I'll just put that there and put a little mark here on my fence. Get my hold all, and I'll just dock that off. Okay, let's tidy all of this stuff up. I don't have to cut any more. I've got 5 minutes. Now I think what I might do is I might just fit the door together, but I won't glue it. I'll glue it off camera. I want to show you how to tidy up once we have them glued and set. These out of the way. Tidy up my workshop. Get rid of that, like this, and I'll fit these together for you just to show you that they do actually work. Gosh, I love it when a plan comes together. And this one's a little bit snug. That's okay though. That will be fine. Bit of sawdust in that one. This one's got, oh no, this one's got a little bit of glue in it. I'll need to tidy that one up with a chisel. A little bit of glue from the back edge. that's come from, but it's tidy that little piece out of there. Beautiful. So there's our door, and that will get fitted into the frame and glued together. As you can see, it just needs pulling in a little bit. Now the beauty of it is everything fits pretty nicely, and it won't take a lot to actually squeeze up, so you don't need a lot of pressure when you're fitting it into your frame. So that will get fitted into my frame. I'll just show you how that works. I've got my frame here. I'm not going to glue it. Normally what I would do is I would put a piece of baking paper under there, a bit of grease proof, just so that the glue from the corners doesn't actually stick to the box or stick to my frame. And glue in there, I would just tidy this up. And for those of you who saw this extra that I added a few months ago, it was halfway through last year, I think. I built this frame just to show you how to make the frame. This is the same one that I made then. And as you can see, that fits in there beautifully. And once that's glued up, you'll have these lovely joints with these lovely butterflies in there. Now, that will get glued together. It will then be put aside to dry for 24 hours. Okay, so give your glue time to dry. So don't sort of get excited about it and then go pull it apart and then realise that you're going to end up the whole thing collapsing. Now, I'm going to go over time a little bit because I just want to show you one other little task. Once you've got all that glued together, the next task is to tidy up the excess that you've got around the top. Now, I'm going to do that with my demo table, a demo top. This is my demo top. So I've basically made the top and the door, sorry. I'll use this door on another little cabinet because it's about the right size for, it'll be quite a nice little cabinet for some sort of tool. But anyway, or a jewellery box, front door. So this is how I go about tidying up my parts. So I'm just going to clamp that to the bench. This is one way of doing it. It's a very simple way. So if you don't have a drum sander that you can run the whole thing through the drum sander, then of course this is probably the better way of doing it. So I've got a flush cut saw. Now these little saws are really good. This is a Japanese tool, one I got from Japanese Tools. If you have a little chat with Christian, he can get hold of these fairly easily. They're a pull saw, so you can actually pull it. You don't actually push it. You can see why I've got that piece of plastic on there, because I could easily scratch my piece of Perspex. Okay, so cut off my excess. And I'm cutting it off just a tiny little bit proud. Not very much, just a little bit. And there we go. You can see it's a little bit proud. And then with a low angle plane. Now, when you're doing this, don't come off your piece of timber because you'll end up tearing the edge of it and you don't want that to happen. Always work onto the piece of timber. So I'll be working this way and that way. So just set your plane very lightly. You don't need to take a lot off. All we're doing is taking the end off the key. like so. Look how nice that's coming up. And of course I'll do the same on the other end. I don't have time to do that one at the moment. I'll then get a piece of, now this is just 100 grit because I'm working on end grain. And then we drop down to a finer grade, a little bit of used 180, and then of course you'll work down through the grades. And as you can see, the butterfly looks really, really nice now. It's just a little bit of work there on some scratch marks. And we just keep working it till we've got it exactly the way we want it. You can see there, and then when you move along to the other end, you can see that it's exactly the same on the other side. The important thing to remember with your doors is make sure that your joints are right. Where your bits of material meet, it's very important that you get exactly where you want them to be. So that's it for today. Next week we're going to have a look at putting the hinges on. So we'll call it quits there, and we'll go on with hinging next week. I will have the door, I'll have the door glued and fitted, and that way at least you'll see where we're at, and then I'll fit the hinges and things like that. So hopefully next week, hinges, get it fitted to the cabinet, and or dress it down to the exact size, and we'll see if we can get that looking quite nice. So that's it for today. If you're in a wet area, please be safe, stay out of the floodwaters if you can, and we will see you all next week.